When I was just a very tiny child, I must have been about 3, I used to have a hard time going to sleep at night. And my mother would sit by my bed and sing. And the one song that she always sang to me was Away in a Manger. And one night in particular, I know I was about 3 because of the house we were in, she was singing Away in a Manger. And she got to the part where the little Lord Jesus lays down his sweet head, and the cattle are lowing, the baby awakes, the little Lord Jesus, no crying he makes. And I thought, I had this thought, I'll never forget what I thought. I thought, Jesus was a baby, like me. That was my first real experience with Jesus. I felt him. He's real. He came upon me like a blanket of electric light energy. And it was so warm and so beautiful, so visceral. And I fell asleep in that beauty that was Jesus. And it started a lifelong desire to know him, to find him. Anybody that made me feel like that, I was interested in. The minister at our church had that warm, radiant feeling about him, and so I had to get to know him better. I really loved him. Well, when I was about 8 years old, my mother got into a disagreement with some ladies in the church and decided to never go back. And so I never went back up until I was 10 years old. And I really had this craving at 10. There were certain things that happened in my life at 10. 10 was a very pivotal time in my life. And I told my mother, I said, I want to go back and hear Father Myers speak. And she said, okay, I'm not going, but I'll take you and I'll drop you off, and then when you're done, you can walk home. So she took me to the church and she dropped me off, and I knew the drill. I was Episcopalian up until I was 8. I pretty much knew what was going to happen. I knew that we would go in, and for 20 minutes we'd stand up and sit down and pray and go through various rituals. And then after that 20 minutes, the children would go out and the father would speak. And I knew that the protocol was for me to leave, but I didn't want to leave. I came there expressly to hear Father Myers speak. And so I thought, if I go to the very back of the pew and I sit at the back of the church and I sit down in the very last pew, and after all the other children leave, I can sit there and they'll let me stay and hear the minister speak. And so that's what I did. And as a 10-year-old, I didn't want to be conspicuous and I didn't want to fidget. I knew when you're 10, you always feel like you're doing something wrong anyway, you know, and that you're going to get busted for some inadvertent thing you did. And so I was trying really hard to be angelic and not make any commotion so that I didn't draw any attention to myself. And all the other children left and the father began to speak. And this weight came off of my chest like, oh, I'm okay, because he looked at the back of the church and he winked at me. I thought, whew, he knows I'm here and it's okay. Wasn't long after that this church lady started looking around the church, seeing who all was in church today. And she looked over her shoulder and she spied me. And she got up and she came to the back of the church and she got in my face. And she said, "You can't be here. You must go with the other children." And immediately a lump came in my throat. I flushed. I was so humiliated. I stood up. I walked out of the church. I stood on the front steps, completely disoriented. Huge lump in my throat. I was literally kicked out of the church for the terrible crime of wanting to hear the minister speak at 10. I stood there and I thought, I vowed to myself, I will never go in this church again. And I didn't until my father died when I was 20. That was the next time, the very next time I set foot in that church. I was so disoriented it took me 3 hours to find my way home, which would normally be a 20-minute walk. I don't know if you've ever had that experience, but literally it took me 3 hours. So that was my first great disillusionment with the church. My second great disillusionment with the church was when I was 16. I still loved Jesus with all my heart. Wanted to know Jesus still with all my heart. I didn't connect Jesus with the church. I never put those two together. I figured, you know, maybe they don't know him like I do. So when I was 16, I got involved with some evangelistic Christians. They claimed to have the truth, and I was open to the truth, so they had me for at least 6 months. And we were going through this little book of truth that they had. It was kind of like their way of indoctrinating you into what they believed. And right at that period of time, my family was deeply concerned about me for being involved with these people. I guess they thought that their 16-year-old, the baby in their family, was getting involved with things, occult maybe, or things she didn't understand. And I don't think they had the heart to live with a religious fanatic. And that's kind of where they saw that going, so they were concerned. And so one night, my brother had a friend over, a long family friend, and he brought his girlfriend. This is a person I've never seen before nor since. And my brother mentioned kind of off the cuff that, yeah, Paula's getting involved with these people. And there was some concern. And this woman looked me right in the eye, and she said, "Can I give you some advice?" And I said, "Well, sure, of course." She said, "You have the ability to know the truth when you hear it. There is something in you that can recognize truth when you hear it." She said, "When someone tells you something and they claim it's the truth, it may or may not be. But if it grinds against your natural beliefs, don't believe it. You'll know if it's the truth, it won't grind against you like that." And those are the words she used. She said, if it's the truth, it will feel true. And something in you will validate that truth. There was something about that truth that was so powerful to me that at 16, I bought that. I said, okay, I believe that. I believe you're right. And thank you. Thank you for that. So it wasn't long after that I went back for a study with this woman who was taking me through this little book and indoctrinating me into this church. And she told me, her name was Mrs. Steer, I'll never forget, lovely English lady. She said, "Now, Paula, I have to tell you something." She said, "If you don't convert your parents to the truth," that's what they call their faith, the truth. "If you don't convert your parents to the truth, God will kill them at Armageddon, and it will be your fault." Let's talk about grind to a screeching, screaming halt.